Here's bread, here is wine, Christ within us, He is with us. Break the bread, taste the wine, Christ is with us here. Here is grace, here is peace, Christ is with us, He is with us. Know His grace, find His peace, feast on Jesus here. In this bread there is healing, in this cup is life forever. In this moment, by this Spirit, Christ is with us here. Here we are, joined as one. Christ is with us. He is with us. We'll proclaim till He comes, Jesus crucified. In this bread there is healing, in this cup is life forever. In this moment, by the Spirit, Christ is with us here. Christ is with us here.
Welcome, everyone, to our Holy Week dinner ritual, our Love Feast. Holy Week is a progression of events that turns the concept of love on its head. Brokenness is shown to be a part and parcel of what it is to love deeply, as we know from Jesus' breaking of the bread at the Last Supper. The culminating irony of our love story with the holy is that we are not the ones who need to look for love, because love comes looking for us, especially in our brokenness and sorrow. As we see from what Jesus said to his loved ones on the cross, love with a capital L is here already and always. This is the source of our ability to love one another. So this dinner is a celebration of love. It is a celebration of the beauty of being together. It is a breaking and sharing of food and of our lives. Our first step is to set a place for love. Let us hear the part of the story of Holy Week where the disciples prepared the way for this poignant Last Supper from the Gospels of John and Matthew.
Just before the Passover feast, Jesus knew that the time had come to leave this world to go to the Father. Having loved his dear companions, he continued to love them right to the end. On the first day of the festival of unleavened bread, the disciples came to Jesus and said, "Where do you want us to prepare for you to eat the Passover meal?" He replied, Go into the city to a certain man and say, 'The teacher says, my time is near. I am going to celebrate the Passover with my disciples at your house.' The disciples did just as Jesus instructed them. They prepared the Passover.
You are now invited to prepare the Passover. Grab the tablecloths and we will set the tables together. Reader number 2 needs the microphone. You can just turn me, okay, I'm on. Once the disciples were in the upper room, Jesus did the first of many surprising things that would occur that night in order to show his beloveds how to continue in the ways of love. Let us hear this reading from the Gospel of John.
Jesus and his disciples were sharing the evening meal. The devil had already provoked Judas, Simon Iscariot's son, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew the Creator had given everything into his hands, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the table and took off his robes. Picking up a linen towel, he tied it around his waist. Then he poured water into a wash basin and began to wash the disciples' feet, drying them with the towel he was wearing. When Jesus came to Simon Peter, Peter said to him, "Lord, are you going to wash my feet?" Jesus replied, "You don't understand what I'm doing now, but you will understand later." "No," Peter said, "you will never wash my feet." Jesus replied, "Unless I wash you, you won't have a place with me." Simon Peter said, "Lord, not only my feet, but also my hands and my head." Jesus responded, "Those who have bathed need only to have their feet washed, because they are completely clean. You disciples are clean, but not every one of you." He knew who would betray him. That's why he said, "Not every one of you is clean." After he washed the disciples' feet, he put on his robes and returned to his place at the table. He said to them, "Do you know what I've done for you? You call me teacher and Lord, and you speak correctly because I am. If I, your Lord and teacher, have washed your feet, you too must wash each other's feet. I have given you an example. Just as I have done, you also must do. I assure you, servants aren't greater than their master, nor are those who are sent greater than the one who sent them. Since you know these things, you will be happy if you do them."
We have prepared a bowl of warm water and towels that will be passed around to wash each other's hands. I'll start this to show you how, then we'll keep it going around the table.
Hearts open, minds awake. Change us now for heaven's sake. Leave us not alone in hatred's wake. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Hearts open, souls awake. Rules we make, we now must break, with our very own lives at stake. We must learn to love. We must learn to love. We must learn to love. have to wake, much to learn from our mistakes. Draw us closer in our heartache. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how to love. Show us how. Show us how to love.
You now are all invited up to get your soup and bread and salad and drink and bring it forward. Bring it back. No, it's just me. Like a good Jewish rabbi, Jesus prayed a blessing over the bread at the beginning of the meal, breaking it open and saying the appropriate and customary words. But then he said added unfamiliar words that no doubt took the disciples aback. Underscoring the gravity of this meal, he said that this bread was his body, broken open in love for all. I invite you to take a piece of bread and break it. In this action, we remember that love sometimes breaks us open, inviting us to share our vulnerability, our fears, and our hope. And when we do, life is more sweet, more meaningful, filled with more of what truly matters. Let us begin our feast, breaking and sharing this good food which has prepared lovingly for us. As we begin, let us lift our plates and simply say together, grateful, grateful. You may eat. Friends, please get your dessert and then gather back. Let us continue the Holy Week story from the Gospel according to John.
Jesus said to them, "Little children, I am with you for a little while longer. You will look for me, but just as I told the Jewish leaders, I also tell you now, where I am going, you can't come. I give you a new commandment: love each other. Just as I have loved you, so you also must love each other. This is how everyone will know that you are my disciples, when you love each other."
Jesus gathered with his friends, who were his family, his traveling companions, his loved ones, and he knew that what he said that night would be remembered long after the gathering. Just as all last words are remembering in a searing way, anyone who has had a difficult diagnosis or is embarking on a dangerous journey knows that there is a heightened sense of attention to what might be final exchanges with loved ones. There is a sense that we must acknowledge and somehow express what matters most. Our Lent series has been all about focusing our attention on these things, on clearing away the obstacles to deep and lasting love of others, of life, of ourselves. So this evening we will be making toasts throughout our dessert as a symbol of the sweetness of opening to love. We remember that at the end of the meal, Jesus lifted his cup for the customary Jewish blessing, and once again he added unfamiliar words that would be remembered even until now.
"Drink from this, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many so that their sins may be forgiven. I tell you, I won't drink wine again until the day when I drink it in a new way with you in love's kingdom."
And so, like Jesus on that night, we will lift a glass and offer a toast of love from the heart. The structure of our toast is this: offer a 1-minute story from your life that exemplifies a moment when you felt a love you'll never forget. Then end it with a toast, raising your glass as a cue for us to raise ours, and saying, "Here's to," fill in the blank with whatever word or phrase feels appropriate based on your story. I will start. It was the beginning of COVID, and that was the year that I was going to turn 40. And I was so depressed because I was going to have this giant party that year, and none of us were together. And then this amazing group of people from Redeemer had the longest, giantest parade come by my house with cars and signs and a unicorn float and offerings for the food pantry. It was amazing. And so that was the time that I really felt loved. Here is to the people of Redeemer. Microphone if anyone wants to share a story of how they felt loved.
Well, when I was a kid, I went on a trip with my family to New York, and we happened to spend the night in Pennsylvania. Actually, I had family in Pennsylvania as well, and we were swimming in a pool, at least I was, and I don't even remember anyone watching me, to be honest, and I somehow went over my head, apparently couldn't swim, and before I instantly felt panic, and before I even had a chance to be more afraid, a big arm was around me. It was my dad. So here's to Ron.
Ron.
And mine is about my dad too. In the months before he passed away, he was becoming more and more mellow. And right the week before he died, we didn't know he was as bad as he was, but I think he knew his cancer was at that point going to take him soon. And he told me that he loved me, which was so out of character for my dad to say that. But I remember him saying it and how wonderful I felt afterwards. And then he passed away a few days later. So here's to Bob.
Bob.
My story was a story when I was a very brand new mom after my first child was born, and it was about 48 hours into it. We were home, and I was one of those moms that, had read tons of books and had a very high, expectation that everything would be perfect, and I was having a really hard time, getting Rachel to sleep in her crib, and she needed to eat every 45 minutes, and what am I doing wrong? And I was so overwhelmed. And my sister-in-law, who had 2 kids at that point, came over with a big pot of chicken noodle soup, and she just kind of took over, and she said, well, you need to put her in a warmer fuzzy thing, because I still had her in that little very thin thing that they send you home from the hospital with, and it was winter, it was in December, and you just need to get her all cozy and layer her up, and then we'll feed her. And she stayed for an hour and a half and imparted all of her sister-in-law wisdom to me, and I just felt very encouraged and loved and taken care of as a new mom, because I thought I had to be the one taking care of and doing the caretaking, and I needed that. So that was to my sister-in-law, Cindy.
To Cindy.
I'm the oldest of 4 children in my parents' family, and when my mother turned 40 years old, on that day she learned that she was pregnant with her 4th. Her younger brother was born, 9 months later, and it was determined that he had Down syndrome. My parents were told that they might want to have him institutionalized, and my mother said, Yeah, right. They named him Robert, Bob, and she spent the rest of her life loving him. I was 18 when Bob was born, and my mother died at the age of 64. And I remember sitting at their home in Florida with my brother at the kitchen table. And he had a copy of the obituary from the paper. He was reading it out loud. He could read. My mother taught him how to read. He got to the list of survivors. And he got to where he said, and Robert, that's me. Here's to my mom and Bob.
Howie's mom and Bob.
I'm sitting here racking my brain thinking, what, and finally I thought of something. So I tell Rick, oh, I'm going to talk about so-and-so. Well, anyway, here's my story. Rick and I got married right out of college, and we had known each other since high school. Yeah, I know. Well, we were born in the same hospital, one day apart. And but he went to a Lutheran school and I went to public school, so we didn't really meet till high school. Anyway, so we had kids. We have 2 daughters, and we lived in Milwaukee, and that was going pretty well. I wasn't one of those people that babysat a lot, so I didn't really know a lot about babies. But you learn quick. So they survived me, and I got better as we went along. But what happened was, how old? We bought our house. First we lived at Keinert's. Yeah, when we got married, we rented this apartment, and then we found out we got pregnant pretty quick. So then we moved to a duplex in Milwaukee, and we lived upstairs. And that's the miracle part. God put us there, because I did not know anything about really having a baby or what to do or anything. The couple that lived downstairs and owned the house, Art and Arlene, they had 6 children. So I thought, oh God, thank you. Because I'd ask Arlene, my mother was in Sheboygan, and I didn't have any family, nobody around, so Arlene was so helpful. Plus, we had, as we lived there for quite a while, we had babysitters right downstairs. They could just walk upstairs and we could go someplace, and then it was a miracle. And I will never forget the joy that we had there and all the things I learned from Arlene. And we got better at parenting.
You'd panic about something and she'd say, oh, that's nothing to worry about.
Oh, Art and Arlene.
Art and Arlene.
We had 2 daughters, as Nancy said, and our oldest daughter, Chris, had, when she was a sophomore in college, she wound up having cancer. and she dropped out of school for a year. That turned out okay, and she went on her merry way, living a good life, a challenging life for us. But when she got pregnant with our grandson, the doctor had told her that she's started having problems with her lungs and her heart, and it was a challenge for them to decide whether she could go through the pregnancy or not, and she did, fortunately, and everything was well. But a couple years later, she started developing serious problems, and we think it was a reaction from the cancer she had had earlier. And she was in and out of the hospital for a number of months. Turned out she had mesothelioma in her lungs. She had some bypasses, some lung surgery, and we were hoping for the best. And Nancy and I were up camping way up north one day and had just said goodbye to Chris right before we left. And we found a ranger came to find us because our other daughter knew where we were and said that Chris was in the hospital. She had been in for a checkup, and she collapsed and wound up in the hospital. And it didn't turn out good. She was basically in a coma for a couple of days. And the part of the story about love is that we had so many people from Redeemer that just showed up. I was going to do this without crying, damn it. They just knew what we needed. They were there. Good friends of ours, now neighbors, Mike Gore, who some of you know used to be a member here, he just took Christopher, who was 4 years old at the time, and just occupied him for a couple of days. But all kinds of people from church just kept showing up and stayed with us. Chris hung on for a couple of days, and finally it was time to let go. And I remember when we had time for the funeral, here's little Christopher, who's only 4 years old. Mary Doperella, it wasn't Doperella at the time, she babysat for him for that whole time. We didn't have to worry about it. Anything we needed, people were just there. Things we didn't know we needed, they were there. And they were all people from Redeemer. So we just have such a fond spot in our heart for all of our Redeemer friends. So a toast to them.
Yes.
I have two grown children, but when they were in high school, teenagers, very challenging. I was very strict with them. And when my son got through, he had a tough time getting through MSOE, and he got through it. And he called me one day and he said, "Mom, remember that time you wouldn't let me go to the rave?" And I was like, "Are you kidding? How could I forget? You made my life very difficult." Of course I remember. And he said, "Well, I just want you to know you were right." And I said, "Wait a minute." "What did you say?" And he said, "You heard me." And he wouldn't repeat it. But so when they were growing up, I didn't always feel the love. But now, every time I talk to them, they always end with, "Love you." My daughter sends me texts every day. And so I know I did right, and I feel very loved by both Tanya and Marco.
Go.
I've got three stories going on in my head, and I'm going to pick one that's not going to make me cry, I hope. Yeah. Okay, I think this one is I'll pick this one. So some of you know that I'm having an ordination anniversary coming up next week. I did not know that anybody would know that, and people have been coming up to me at church saying, "Oh, it's your anniversary." I'm like, "How did you know?" When I graduated from seminary, I can't remember how many people were in our class, maybe 40, 30. And people started getting their calls and going off to churches, and I went to all the ordinations because I wanted to see how it's done, and I wanted to be there with my friends, my colleagues. And more were getting calls, and I hadn't gotten anything yet, so I kept on going to the ordinations, and it was great. And I was the second to last person in our class to get a call. And when I was ordained, all of my classmates showed up at my ordination. So here's to good friends.
It won't make me cry.
Good.
It won't make me cry.
Well, I was in the crying mood.
No. Last year, the school that I used to teach at celebrated the 50th anniversary. They started in '72. And I went to, they produced a movie, which was all about the history of Indian Community School. And I went to I was invited. I went to the movie and I saw, students and people that I knew. And that just really made me feel good. Then I went to the dinner at the school, and they're doing slideshows, and I'm seeing my picture up on the slideshow, like a picture I had never seen with this one little boy that I really liked, Xavier, Javier, his name was, and I just felt really loved when that family came up to me, and they were so happy to see me. And so here's to the De Hoyos family.
Any other stories? Anyone else want to share? You can pass it down to reader 5. I don't know who reader 5 is. When Jesus and his disciples had finished dinner, Jesus took them to the Garden of Gethsemane so he could pray there. It was late, and the disciples were sleepy. While they dozed, Jesus had a conversation with God that sounded very human, very vulnerable. In fact, it sounded as if he was looking for love, just as we find ourselves doing when life is hard.
My Abba, Father, if it's possible, take this cup of suffering away from me. But if it's not possible that this cup be taken away unless I drink it, then let it be what you want.
What happened next was a flurry of soldiers, arrests, interrogations, and disciples in distress as they struggled to know what to do while feeling exposed, threatened, and unsafe. They did all the things we know we sometimes do as fear gets hold of us. And then the crowds, who themselves were under political oppression in a pressure cooker of high holy days in Jerusalem, began to get caught up in the frenzy of political power, and Jesus' fate was sealed. Crucifixion, the Romans' most hideous way to execute prisoners of the state, was the sentence. They took him to Golgotha, which means skull place, and hung him on a cross next to 2 criminals. There was mocking and ridicule by authorities who believed a true king would never have been left to die. But in the midst of all this, Jesus' last acts and words were simply about love. He assured a repentant criminal that he was forgiven by God. He looked upon his mother and made sure one of the disciples was going to care for her like his own mother. He forgave his executioners.
Forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing.
And in these moments, he showed us how to love. This is the true kingdom of love. He laid down his life because his message of love and justice for the oppressed, the unlovable, the outcasts, and sinners was a threat to the powers that be, those that use fear to rule, not love. What will we choose? Fear or love? Hatred or love? Fame and fortune or love? As we listen to this last song, Table of Love, I invite you to answer those questions by lighting your candles as the lighter is passed around the table.
Here we are, you and me. I wonder if we're supposed to be here at this table. Draw me in as I am. I hope that you will understand as I come to this table of love. I am tired, I am worn, I am broken, I am torn. So I come to this table. I let your peace fill my soul, cleanse my heart and make me whole. Here at this table of love, I've come here to lay it all down. Come to lift me up, and now we're forever bound by this bread and by this cup. I was lost, now I'm found, since we all have gathered round. This table, I was blind, now I see all the ways you welcome me. Here at this table of love, I've come to lay it all down. You've come to lift me up, and now we're forever bound by this bread and by this cup. Here at this table of love.
Holy and merciful one, in this season of discernment, we have come bringing our deepest longings and our failed attempts at satisfying them. We have often looked for love, for acceptance and security in the trappings of things that don't, in the end, really satisfy our longing for love. We yearn for lives that matter. We desire relationships that thrive. We want less regret. At times, we fail to see that you have already given us what really matters, your love and acceptance. In this moment of remembering your love poured out for us through your life, your ministry, your death, help us, O God, to choose love every time, no matter the cost. We know now that the cost of looking for love elsewhere is a price too high in this precious life. Be with all of us now as we move into the night, as we wait for what we have the luxury of knowing, that love wins in the end. But for now, let us commit to whatever change is necessary to bring more love into our lives and into the world. Amen. Thank you all for coming tonight. We invite you back tomorrow for Good Friday. Looks like the weather's gonna be good enough, so we'll have the walk set up from noon until about 7, and then our service is at about 5 p.m. on Friday. Go into the night, blessings.